the S.O.A.P video series from Oak Tree Community Church in South Bend, Indiana. We are almost done at this point through our little journey through the book of Mark.
Yep.
And this...
Always get itchy this time, right?
Right, we're almost
getting towards the end.
Yeah. We're in chapter 14. Chapter 14 is the longest chapter in Mark, or the longest, or the second longest in Mark. And so we just got into it last time by a couple of verses. This week it's all chapter 14 all the time. And then next time we'll finish up in chapters 15 and 16. Yep. And we're right at the end of Passion Week in our reading here. So
last week Jesus said, come into Jerusalem. A number of conversations with religious leaders and a number of other people. Most are contentious, a lot of headbutting in there, but not all. There were a few individuals who start to understand who Jesus is, and I think we talked about it last week too. Mm-hmm. But the leaders are still planning on assassinating him. It's a goal for them now. And we ended last week with Jesus being anointed and Judas planning on betraying Jesus.
So we're picking up this week in verse 12 with the preparation for the Passover. So the Passover would have been on Friday or Saturday, depending on who you're asking. The calendar's a little weird. I mean, as far as people trying to figure it out because of the year and everything. But I think this is Thursday. I think this is Thursday. They're going to have their meal after 6 p.m., which technically makes it Friday, right? Before he's crucified on Friday, and we'll see all that next week.
Yeah, and you got to figure everybody in their world is doing exactly the same thing, right? Because there's a prescribed way to do the Passover. So most people, they're eating very similar food, not exactly the same.
Should be pretty close.
Yeah,
though.
right. There's 4 or 5 things you have
to include, right?
In there, and the big discussion on where are we going to have it. How is this going to work? And Mark goes into a lot of detail, which is kind of odd for Mark on getting this set up. And a lot of people think that, it's Jesus miraculously, prophesizes, hey, you two go here, you'll meet a man.
You'll see a guy.
Yeah, you'll see a guy, yeah, right, by the water. And, he'll take you to the house and he'll have everything. And maybe that is true, but what's more likely is it was just pre-set up.
Yeah.
And Jesus talking to him, hey, how are we going to find you? What's your address? Nah, just come to the well.
Yeah.
I'll be at the well.
Yeah.
And, a guy at a well
that's
probably
going to be a little different.
Yeah. Probably one of the few there. So.
And they needed a place where they could handle 13 men.
Yep.
Around a table.
Yeah.
Or 26, like in the picture of the Last Supper, because can we have
everybody
a table
on one side?
Can we have a table for 26, please? But there are only 13 of you. Yeah, but we're only going to sit on one side.
Yeah. Right.
So they needed the space. They had and plus serving space and everything. So it's not a small room.
Right.
So
right. So not a ton of places, and it's packed, right? I mean, everybody's trying to. It's like going out to eat on Mother's Day, right?
Right.
Get your reservation in early.
Yeah. And because of Passover, like you said, I mean, the city is overrun.
Right.
Overrun with people from outside and everything. So
while they're eating, Jesus says one of the disciples will betray him. The one who dips his hand into the bowl with me. Now, oddly enough, in Mark's version, we already know it's Judas, right? I mean, he's planning on doing it. He's been identified, but Mark doesn't actually record that he does dip.
Right.
Other ones do. Other Gospels' messages do.
Yeah, I don't think it matters, though, because it actually happened, and nobody picked up on it anyway.
Yeah, right. That was one of the things that, hey, Mark never says Judas did it.
Right,
Yeah, but we get into communion, right? Or, the Lord's Supper. In aspect, what we now call communion.
What we now call the Lord's Supper. I mean, technically, it's still just their Passover meal. I mean, it was nothing special as far as these guys were concerned. Passover was special, but it's nothing more than Passover at this point.
Right. So bread is broken. which symbolizes Jesus's body.
Yeah.
Another thing I was thinking about was when Jesus was on the cross, nothing broke. Right, they didn't break any bones.
No bones.
Yeah.
Right.
So the and I get the breaking of the bread.
Yeah.
And it's symbolic to what happened to Jesus, but none of his bones were broken. I mean, he went through anguish.
Yeah,
for
and
sure.
I've really wrestled with this over the years. Is it really broken? Is it not broken? And I had a conversation with somebody once who said, okay, his bones weren't broken, but other places prophecy says that his bones were out of joint. Everything was, misaligned and pulled apart. So just because bones weren't broken, skin was definitely broken.
Right.
So it's not a stretch to say his body was indeed broken, even if the bones.
That's a good point.
According to, I've got it written down here, Psalm 34 says that my bones were not broken. So that's the prophecy. John ties it into that. But his body certainly, I think, is considered broken.
Right. So then, and that was during the meal, right? And then at the very end, they have, I think you even said it, a fourth cup.
Yeah,
of
there's
wine.
4 cups of wine that are drunk at different points throughout we call it the Seder, or the Passover meal.
Now, would have been called Seder meal at that point, or did that come later?
Yeah, and I honestly, it's a good question. I don't know. Yeah, I really don't know. Each one of these cups of wine represented a different thing, okay? And so the fact that it was the last one, Paul in 1 Corinthians 11 says, after supper he took the cup and said, so it's that one. The other gospel writers say after they had eaten. I think Luke says after they had eaten. So I think it's the whole meal. And that cup was the one that symbolizes the future restoration and the kingdom. And so the fact that he says it's the cup of the new covenant, and I will not drink it again until I'm with you in the kingdom, it's very kingdom oriented. It's very future oriented. And I think that helps us understand that the new covenant is still future oriented for the kingdom as well. So it's not just, here's a cracker, here's some juice, and they did it at the same time. Over the course of the meal, those two things were actually spread out.
Right. Yeah, and the Passover meal takes hours.
Yeah, it can.
To go through it. Right.
Yeah, so he sort of went off script a little bit with the bread. They're like, okay, whatever. And then at the end, he went off script again.
Right.
And they're like, okay, whatever.
Yeah, and then later.
Yeah, it was. They didn't really pick up on what was going on there.
Yeah. So they're done with the meal. I think they're walking to the Mount of Olives, right? And we get into Peter's denial, prediction of his denying. Certainly, Peter told Jesus under no circumstances would he deny him.
Right.
No doubt with that. But this story's always hit me a little hard, and I put myself in Peter's place because. I'd like to think I haven't denied Jesus, but at the very least, I haven't been most vocal about him either too, as I should have been. And I've certainly never been in a position as a Christian where my life was in danger, like Peter was. So I'm not trying to put myself in his shoes at all. But to me, the key point isn't that Peter denied Jesus, or even that he denied that he would fall away, because who wouldn't say I wouldn't do it? But what gets me every time is the bitter tears, right? And when he finally hits the realization, and this is later, where this went down exactly like it happened. And no possibility to ever think it was going to go this way. Jesus was exactly right, and bitter tears came out.
Yeah.
But at the end, did Jesus forgive him? Yep. Did Peter still feel bad? Yep.
Yeah.
But did Peter also grow closer to Jesus because of it?
Yeah.
And yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
And the restoration definitely comes later. Mark doesn't include it.
Right.
John.
Yeah.
Let's see. John chapter 21, where he asks Peter, 3 times, do you love me? Do you love me? Do you love me? Oh, yeah.
That's what you said last time.
Yeah. Right. But it does seem to be at a different level, right?
Yeah.
Or a different understanding.
Some people think that Jesus did that 3 times because of the 3 denials.
Oh, interesting.
And sort of
Yeah.
paralleling, you denied me 3 times, now you have to confess and acknowledge me 3 times. I don't know if that's true or not, but some people do see a parallel.
Kind of
there.
a nice thing.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So now they go to Gethsemane, which is just a garden at the bottom of the Mount of Olives. So Mount of Olives, also on a hill or mountain. If you're from Indiana, it's a mountain. Anything over 20 feet, huh?
If you're from anywhere else, it's a hill, right?
Yeah, right.
It's like an olive grove. Gethsemane is like an olive grove. And from what I've heard, there are actually still trees or tree stumps there today.
Oh, from that old.
That are that old. There's actually a place you could, I mean, if we knew what it was, we could actually go to that same place and say, this is where the disciples were sleeping. This is where Jesus was praying. The same tree may still be there.
Yeah. Wow, that's kind of cool.
Yeah.
So this is the beginning of the end, really, and the disciples are of no help. Right? They keep falling asleep. So Jesus goes off and prays, come back, you're sleeping, get up. He goes off again, prays, comes back, does that a number of times. In fact, they're having so much trouble staying awake. Do you think there's demonic forces there? Or they're just had too much to eat?
Could be too much. It's the middle of the night is the other thing. This is probably, I mean, if dinner didn't even start until after 6. And then there was some teaching. Mark doesn't include this, but John, you've really got chapter the washing of the feet and the meal and some teaching, and Judas had to leave and some more teaching, through chapter 14 of John. This has gone on for several hours now. So this is probably 9-10 o'clock at night by this point.
Yeah.
And then they're walking out there and it's dark and it's quiet and he's over there praying and they're just like,
Yeah. I mean, I'd get the whole falling asleep part. Yeah, happens to me all the time. But.
I don't know that it was. Demonic forces, but you have Peter. He's like, I'm gonna stand up and fight for you, and he can't even keep his eyes open, right?
But he did fight.
He did fight for him. He did.
Yeah. Took a swing. Let's see what else in there. So then the betrayal happens, right?
Yeah,
Judas comes. It's always Judas kisses Jesus, and that's how they know who it is.
Yeah.
One of the commentaries I read that said he actually kissed Jesus' hands. That was a standard greeting. Versus I always figured it was a kiss on the cheek.
Yeah.
But you kind of see in some movies sometimes too where like the teacher gives hands and the people are putting it in their face, kissing the guy's hands.
Yeah.
Or the teacher's hands. So
Yeah, in a lot of churches and denominations today, you've got it this way, right? A ring
kiss a finger.
or a
Yeah,
finger
right.
or something.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Either way, it was a sign of greeting. It was a sign of affection, and in a sense, it was a sign of mock respect. Because either way, whether it's his cheek or his hands or whatever, this is something that you would do to somebody you respect.
Right.
And what he said is, the person that I am going to do this to, that's your guy.
He's the guy, right?
Yeah.
Right. So Mark says a bystander drew his sword and struck the high priest's slave, cutting off his ear. John says it was Peter.
I wonder why Mark didn't say it was Peter.
Right. Well, you never admit to a felony, right? Even if you're
Maybe Peter forgot it was Peter, right? I remember seeing somebody.
So
do
either
this.
Peter didn't tell Mark, or Mark's
However,
just omitting that information.
Just a couple verses later, it sounds like Mark might have been there.
Yeah, exactly.
So maybe Mark was trying to protect Peter's reputation.
Right. So the disciples fled, just like Jesus said they would.
Yep.
And then there's a couple odd sentences. A young man was following them wearing only a linen cloth, and it seems like they tried to capture him and grab the cloth, and he just took off naked, running away. So that historically is Mark.
Mark is the only one who records that.
Yeah.
So
with the detail is like he was there, right?
this was an eyewitness account, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. So Jesus is led to the high priest. There's a whole series of things happen. I think what's interesting is during the condemnation by the Sanhedrin, they haven't quite got their story straight yet.
Yeah.
So they have Jesus. They're excited. Wait, now we need somebody to bring charges against him. Go get the false witnesses.
Well,
and
and
their
it took
stories weren't collaborating.
Yeah, it
with
took
each
them
other.
some time, because now you're talking, what, 10, 11 o'clock, midnight? I mean,
Yeah.
what
you gotta
time
go
is
wake some
this? You
people
got
up.
to wake some people up to get some, do you remember what he said 3 years ago? It's like, come on,
Right. I do think it's kind of telling. They finally just asked him, "Who are you?"
Yeah.
Or actually, "Are you the Christ, the Son of the Blessed One?" And Jesus says, "I am." Right? Direct
There it
question,
is. Yeah.
direct answer, and that from their standpoint, that's all they needed to hear.
Right, and John tells us, I think it's John 19, that their accusation against him in that room was, you being a man make yourself out to be God. They knew it was a claim of deity. They knew he'd been doing this all along, and that's what they were trying to get him on. And they finally had him on that.
Yeah, so another rejection of the nation of Israel with the condemnation.
Yeah, the
Or
final
Jesus
one, right?
says who he is, and they're like, no way.
Yep.
Tearing cloths, let's take him in. And then we end with Peter's denial. We already talked about it from that standpoint.
Yep.
But Jesus is off at his various places of trial, and Peter denies.
One of the neat things I like about this is we don't think about it in Bible times so much. We know it in our real life experience. If you go to different parts of the U.S. or different parts of the world, you'll hear a different accent, right? You go to London is a different accent than North England,
Right.
all the different places, Southern United States, Boston,
Right.
Massachusetts, the Eastern, right? I mean the whole thing, right? One of the things that shows up here is, you're Galilean, aren't you? I don't know what you're talking about, right? They're down in Jerusalem, and they're like, I know that accent.
Right? Yeah, you must be with him.
Yeah. Why else would you be here in the middle of the night
Right.
if you're not with him? And I'm pretty sure you're from the north.
Yeah. Yeah, you can see it happening.
And so there's some. If you take all of the accounts together, we find that Jesus was on trial, in a sense, like 6 different times. And especially it was against the Mosaic law to have a trial at night. It had to have been held, it was supposed to be held during the day. We're not having these night trials. We're not doing these backdoor secret things. 3 of the 6 were done by the Sanhedrin at night.
Yeah.
I mean, they were flagrantly, blatantly going against the law that they were supposed to be upholding. They just needed to get rid of this guy.
Right.
By any means possible. And then you've got Pilate, and Pilate sent him to Herod, Luke tells us, and Herod sent him back to Pilate until, he finally okayed the crucifixion, which we'll see next week. But, so we've got all that going on, and Peter's outside, and like you said, everybody else had run away.
Right. Imagine how scared everybody would be.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, this is the guy, who's in your mind is the Messiah, right? And is gonna come and take over and do things, and now he's been arrested.
Yeah. And it's sort of, I mean, you almost have to wonder if they started to think that Judas might have been right. Because remember, Judas wasn't, number one, he wasn't trying to get Jesus killed. Okay, he was just trying to show him for what he thought he was, and that's a charlatan. He's just another one of these fake Christs that have been running around. Because if the real Messiah would never go through that, so I've got to get him out in the open. Right, he had become disillusioned, and now all this stuff is happening. And like Zechariah says, strike the shepherd, the sheep are scattered.
Yeah.
And they're wondering, was Judas right?
Right. Well, questioning your whole life.
Yeah.
Right. This isn't the way it was supposed to be, even though they had been told
Yeah, how many
for
times,
the past
right?
10 chapters, right?
Yeah.
That this is exactly what's
Well,
going to happen.
didn't John the Baptizer do the same thing? He gets sent to prison, and he sends a note to Jesus and said,
Who are you? Yeah.
"Are you the one that we were waiting for?" I mean, I'm supposed to be preaching, ahead of the Messiah, and now I'm in prison. This is not how I thought it was going to happen.
Yeah, very true. Well, yeah, that happens in our lives all the time, right?
Yeah.
Or I know exactly how this is going to work out, and that's exactly how it doesn't work out.
Yeah, yeah. And that's really sort of on the path. That's really how perseverance and godliness, fit into the path, right? It's easy to learn something, obey something, whatever, but then there's the perseverance and then there's the godliness. And that's where we leave them this week is everybody's gone. Peter's denied him. What's next?
Right. Right. So this is, in our world, Friday night. Right? Thursday night into Friday morning.
Into Friday morning.
Friday morning.
Yeah, Thursday night into Friday morning.
Yep. And by now, it's still the middle of the night, and I think when we pick back up, things start happening quicker.
Yeah. We'll pick up in chapter 15 next time early in the morning, so probably, they don't want to wake Pilate up too early. So,
Yeah, it sounded like he started early, though.
Yeah. Between 4 and 6 in the morning, probably. So, not my ideal time
Hearing
of day.
cases. Yeah.
So, well, hopefully you found that enlightening. Couple of things that we talked about there, and just the encouragement that when things are going exactly what seems to be wrong, Jesus was in charge of this whole operation. He knew what was going on. He told them what was going on. He was not caught off guard. It was just everybody else was. And so hopefully that's a good reminder to us as we go through our lives as well. Next week we'll finish the book of Mark, and then we'll move on from there. See you next time.